Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight for the AC Transit Director at Large Candidate Forum, organized by the League of Women Voters, Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. My name is Madeline Cronenberg, and I'm from the League of Women Voters of West Contra Costa County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not support or oppose candidates or parties. The advocacy arm of the League may take positions on issues such as ballot measures. However, this forum is presented by the Voter Services and Education arm of the League, which does not take positions or advocate for them. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates have all agreed to participate under the ground rules set for this forum. These ground rules are posted in Eventbrite. The candidates are not permitted to display campaign buttons, t-shirts, signs, Zoom backgrounds, etc., in order for us to maintain neutrality. We are recording tonight's forum, and the session will be available on our website, the lwvbae.org, also through votersedge.org/ca, and with links on our social media accounts at lwvbae. There are 3 candidates running for AC Transit at Large Director. They are Chris Peoples, Dolene Jones, and Victoria Fierce. On your ballot, you will be able to choose one candidate out of the 3. The ground rules. Now, let's go over a few of the ground rules. Each candidate has 2 minutes for opening remarks. The order was determined by drawing lots. The timekeeper will signal candidates with a green colored window, which will count down the seconds from 2 minutes to 15 seconds to go, when it will turn yellow, and then red when the full 2 minutes is up. As people signed up via Eventbrite, they submitted written questions. If you have additional questions, you may type them in by clicking the Q&A icon. Our volunteers will take the questions and pass them to me. All questions will be screened to avoid duplication and personal attacks. The order of answering the questions will be alternated, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. Again, the timekeeper will signal the candidates. There will be no separate rebuttals. However, the candidates may choose to use some or all of their 1 minute to rebut the response given by another candidate. Following the questions, each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. And now we will begin our forum. Each candidate will give an opening statement of 2 minutes. And our first candidate is Ms. Jones. Oh, unmute, Ms. Jones. Unmute.
Unmute. I thought Ms. Chan was going to unmute me. Got the power. So thank you. Good evening, League of Women Voters and members, Contra Costa County and Alameda County, Berkeley, Albany, San Pablo, maybe, and my running mates. I hope everyone is well. We're going toward the finish line. I'm glad to see everyone and hear everyone. I'm Dolene C. Jones. I'm running for the AC Transit Board of Directors at Large seat. Welcome to the 2020 election. I would like to start by saying that it's been an honor and a pleasure to run for the AC Transit Board all these years. And that my 3 priorities that I listed today on Voter's Edge, and they're in the queue waiting to be looked over and approved to be broadcast. I guess I haven't checked, but my long-term planning term for safety and emergency policies and procedures for the long haul. Like, what is AC Transit going to do in the event of earthquakes? What, specifically, we need to get down to the brass tacks here because everything is coming down the pipe. And funding. Another development of sustainable funding solutions to each in every regional transportation network district and stay within those goals that are set forth by the MTC. Thank you all for coming, sharing your questions and ideas, and I'm looking forward to serving you for 21 more years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And now our next candidate with her opening statement is Ms. Fierce.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Victoria Fierce, and I ride the bus. And with me, we have an opportunity to elect the district's first trans director and our first LGBTQIA representation in nearly a decade. And I'm running for office because I know that the bus can save the world. Our climate is changing rapidly, and it's time that AC Transit changes with it. I'm a community organizer, acting locally yet thinking globally. I get people excited about cities and the public transit that knits us together. My platform is competency, efficiency, and collaboration with our East Bay cities and our state government. Because I know that's what we need to get more bus lanes, more BRT, a rideshare tax, and universal bus shelters. I don't have a whole lot of faith in the federal government being able to fund these things short of a Biden win this November. That's why I'm working very closely with leaders in Sacramento to get funding boosted for the district in time for next year's budgets. AC Transit is projecting massive cuts to service if we don't get this problem fixed. And that's why I'm running, because I am a collaborator. I work together, I pull people together, and I make sure that people know that these are real problems that we have to solve. And I've got the answers. I've got many answers to this. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by Assemblymember Bill Quirk, San Leandro Councilmember Victor Aguilar, Berkeley Councilmember Rashi Kasrwani, the Bay Area Reporter, Assembly candidate Alex Lee, the East Bay Young Democrats, the Southern Alameda County Young Democrats, and the East Bay Stonewall Democrats. My support is wide and broad. It comes from all over the East Bay. Again, I am a collaborator in the East Bay because that's what we need to knit our cities together. The last 50 years of the East Bay history have been about cities pulling up their walls and pulling up their bridges and saying no more. Well, I'm here to say we want more. We need more. I'm not here for a politics of scarcity. I'm here for a politics of abundancy. And I believe that the bus can save the world if we get everybody on it. And I'm very excited to be running for office here. And I'm very excited to be here and honored and humbled to be in front of the League of Women Voters asking for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fierce. And now, Director Peoples.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for providing this valuable service. They do it every election, and I depend on them to figure out who I vote for in any situation where I don't particularly know the folks. My name is Chris Peoples. I have been your at-large director in AC Transit now for 23 years. I am the lead director on our climate change zero emission bus program. I'm also the lead director on our environmental justice in transportation program. Over the years, I have worked a whole lot with many of the elected officials in the East Bay, and I encourage you to go to the Voter's Edge, which is what I use as my website, and look at my endorsements. I'm not going to list them all here because there's too many of them. I'm endorsed by 9 sitting mayors, 5 retired mayors, 27 council members, by Senator Skinner, Senator Wykowski, Assembly Member Bonta, and on and on and on. So I work with a whole lot of people. I have chaired or co-chaired the last 3 partial taxes that AC Transit has done. Very important to keep up our funding. I've been involved in all of the transportation sales taxes in Alameda and Contra Costa counties for the last 40 years. I have done major lobbying both in Sacramento and in Washington on behalf of AC Transit. And I think that we can get through all of this, but it's going to be necessary to work with a whole lot of people to do that. So I stand for election in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to begin with the questions. So you have 1 minute to answer the questions. And the first question will be, you'll each get a chance to answer each of the questions just in different order. The first question, the first answer is going to be Director Peoples, and this is the question. We understand that we are currently sheltering in place, but before COVID-19, how frequently did you ride the bus? And what was your experience as a rider?
I've been riding AC Transit for 45 years. I gave up my car 22 years ago. I only travel on transit. I think my record was one day I rode 12 different AC Transit buses. I rode the bus from my home in the Piedmont Avenue area to AC Transit every day. Since my stroke 10 years ago, I have been working full-time at AC Transit. My experience on riding the bus is pretty good. There are occasionally problems. Earlier, I guess about a year ago, we had a lot of problems because we had expanded service, but we've been unable to hire enough drivers. And that was a big problem. That had sort of gone away when COVID hit. And of course, the COVID is a mess. But no, I ride AC Transit and every other form of transit around the Bay Area and around the world quite regularly.
Thank you. Same question to Ms. Fierce. Would you like me to repeat the question?
It's about before COVID, how much I rode and what's my experience.
And what was your experience?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. There's a lot of people who do run for transit board and try and get involved in transit who simply don't ride transit. And I'm proud to say I'm not one of those people. I haven't owned a car for many years. I've rode AC Transit just about every day before COVID. And I still do every now and then here in these times when I have to get around. Wherever AC Transit doesn't get me to go, I take my bike. I'm a very green transportation person. However, that's not to say that my experience with AC Transit has been all roses and flowers. Most recently, last month, there was a large failure in the district to communicate when they had cut service for most of the Berkeley Hills and a lot of Berkeley. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their transit and nobody knew about it. The district had made one tweet and sent an email, but that's just not sufficient. And that's the kind of change that I'm looking to bring is we need to have a crisis communication plan. We need to respect our riders and understand these problems that we're having.
Thank you, Ms. Fierce. And Ms. Jones, same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
I would like to unmute myself again.
Yes. Okay.
How about that?
That's good.
Yes. I've been riding AC Transit since I moved here from the East Coast, which is June of 1989. I remember taking AC Transit to the training center in Hayward as a part-time bus driver. I remember taking AC Transit to the San Francisco and to anywhere I wanted to explore because this was my first time moving to California. So I did a lot of discovery and exploring and learning. And that's why I worked out of each and every yard that AC Transit owns, all of their 4 properties where bus drivers can go and pick up the equipment. So I learned all the routes within 6 years. So I've had a lot of experience with riders in their own neighborhoods, and I saw the challenges across the board. That's why I run for the at-large seat, because I know the whole district. Thank you.
Second question, and we're going to start this with Ms. Fierce. And the question is, do you support transit-only lanes on the Bay Bridge? And if so, what will you do to achieve this goal?
Thanks. That's a really important question. I absolutely support bus lanes on the Bay Bridge. And to do that, excuse me, To do that, that's why I'm a regional collaborator. Most recently, I just finished up a term as an appointee to the Association of Bay Area Government's Regional Housing Planning Committee. And using that, I've been able to have a regional perspective on how these things go through a regional body like MTC and ABEG, the group that actually decides that. However, bus lanes on the Bay Bridge aren't the complete story. There is a large pattern of buses getting stuck behind cars and slow traffic in the run-up to the Bay Bridge. And that's where I think the largest priority needs to be. Once you're passed through the toll plaza, the bridges, the Trans-Bay buses, they fly pretty quickly, and that's fine. The bus bridge or bus lanes on the bridge would be great, but like I said, we need to bring some into the lead up onto it, and that's the change I'm going to bring.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, same question. Yep, unmute.
Unmute. Let me unmute.
There we go. You're back.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I absolutely believe in the bus lanes across the Bay Bridge. Prior to moving to California, I'm one of the bus drivers. I used to work at New Jersey Transit, and we transported people from New Jersey to New York to the Port Authority in bus lanes. So it works. When it's structured properly, there's organization, there's safety parameters all around for everyone, including the cars. And once people get used to it, and due to the fact that the Bay Bridge is now constructed differently, we can do it on top as well as the bottom, coming back to Oakland. I'm gonna push for that. And since Treasure Island's developing, a lot of changes are happening. So this is a great time to implement that plan. Good job, Ron Bonta. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Peoples.
Yes, I support it like everybody else does. I actually remember when we had a bus lane on the bridge for a very short time in 1962, when they converted the bridge to one, each level being one direction. We had a bus lane. It was fairly successful, but Caltrans decided to stop it. I've been pushing for that for a number of years. I actually helped get a major study done by Arup, the international engineering firm, that talked about a contraflow lane on the lower deck of the bridge. There's not really a problem eastbound because there's so much constriction on the Central Freeway that limits the amount of buses coming onto the bridge eastbound. The problem is westbound in the morning. That could be handled by a contraflow lane, but the SFMTA is against that because they think it'll bring more cars into the city. So if it's got to be on the top lane, it's got to be on the top floor of the bridge, but I'm all for it.
Thank you. Next question, and we're going to start with Ms. Jones. And the question is, do you support free bus service? And if so, what will you do to achieve this goal?
Yes, I support free bus service when we find the free money to support it. Because we're all starting at zero with this COVID pandemic situation. I love the spare the air days when people would get on and they would see that fare box covered with that bag and they're like, oh, this is helping my budget. I'm like, yeah, I know it is. So as soon as we find the money, sure, why not have the free bus on some routes? Because we all live in America. Everything just can't be free, but we can dream, but we need to find that free money.
Thank you. And the same question to Director Peoples.
Pretty much the same answer. AC Transit gets a relatively small amount of its operating money through the fare box, only about 16%. But a number of our funding sources through the state are tied to what's called fare box recovery. Now, they play games with the fare box recovery because in theory, we're supposed to have 30% and we've only got about 16. But doing free fares first would require finding money. And we have relatively limited sources of money. I've worked very hard to get some of the ones that we've got. But secondly, we need to go up to Sacramento and spend a lot of time and energy changing some of those laws that require fare box recovery ratio. I'm not sure that's the best use of our time and energy. I think we need to be doing things like the stuff Victoria and her group do, encouraging more dense housing, doing red lanes and all that stuff. But yes, if we can find the money, I'm all for it.
Thank you. And Ms. Fierce, same question. Do you support free bus service? And if so, what will you do to achieve this goal?
Yep. I absolutely support it. It's really important for a lot of reasons. I mean, obviously the one is it would be free, which is less of a hit on people's budgets. I think another under discussed aspect of this is that it would actually basically eliminate fare enforcement, which is a big source of police interactions for people of color. And getting rid of that, I think, is really big. It's a racial justice issue to do free transit. And as far as how we're going to get it, you know, I'm a big supporter of implementing a rideshare tax, which would get cars out of the way of buses while still funding transit. Los Angeles right now has free transit. It wasn't intentional, but they've got it and they seem to be doing it just fine. So it's proof that we can do it and we don't necessarily have to go to Sacramento to fix things. But it is absolutely important that we do that, which is why I'm already working on lobbying the Sacramento Capitol and the legislature to make sure that we get funding for transit in the next budget. Budget season's coming up in January, and we got to change it to fund this.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Director Peoples. And the question is, what steps is AC Transit taking to ensure the COVID safety of its passengers? And what will you do to enhance COVID safety protocols?
We've actually got a fairly extensive document out on that. There's really two elements. There's worrying about the airflow, the ventilation through the buses. We've changed all our filters in all the HVAC to MERV filters. Unfortunately, we could only go to MERV 7 because going above that causes the motors to burn out. We've done a lot of work and piggybacking on some national work that's been done figuring out what combination of windows, doors, and roof hatches do you open to get the maximum airflow through the bus. And we're doing that. There's also, and it's less important as we know more and more about COVID and the fact that it's spread by air, but we're also doing substantial amounts of cleaning on the bus using some stuff called vital oxide and low pressure foggers for the bus. And I've been very supportive of all of that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fierce.
Yeah, COVID safety is obviously very important for people. It's literally a life and death issue. And so AC Transit needs to act like it. And AC Transit right now, the district is doing good work on ventilation. I didn't actually know about this research that Director Peoples suggested, but that sounds really cool. I wish that the district would tell people about these things. It should be tweeting nonstop about this and these changes and how the system is working to make it safe. In addition, you know, we need to be thinking beyond just the bus. Right now, automobile sales are going up because people don't feel comfortable sharing space with people on a bus. So that's why AC Transit should, you know, invest in bike share, invest in scooter share, these more individualized personal transportation options that do have this like ventilation built in. And on top of that, you know, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about police encounters is if riders are required to wear a mask, we need to be providing a mask for them on the bus instead of saying it's your fault that you didn't come and bring one and then increasing the chance of police interactions. That's just not what we should be doing.
Thank you. And Ms. Jones.
Yes, as a matter of fact, one of my third bullet points on that voter's edge is to increase ridership during these tumultuous times during COVID. So I would like to see the cleaning, not only on the bus, but from the inside of AC Transit, from the buildings, from everybody touching everything, all the way to the outside. If you have a sick driver who's been tested before they started their shift, but somehow develops it by the next morning, that's an issue. That's an issue, and it must be addressed. So it's going to take funding to do all of that, and we need it. It's the board of directors' job to get it done.
Thank you. Next question, we were going to start with Ms. Fierce. And this is, how do you propose to overcome the fiscal shortfall due to the drop in ridership and revenues in the short term and in the long term?
Thanks for that. I'm going to answer the long-term one because it's easier. But right now I'm supporting Prop 15, which is on the ballot. It proposes to generate about $30 million for the district every year. That's a huge deal. That is approximately 50% of our fare revenue, and according to the last budget documents the district put forward. And that's, you can't really ignore that. That's a big chunk of money. In addition, I'd also like to see, like I said earlier, a rideshare tax implemented. And these things are going to take a very long time to come around, which is, again, why I'm going back to Sacramento to lobby for more funding, make sure that we get money for this, because the district can't run a deficit. It can't go into debt like this. It's too late to put another bond on the ballot, so we have to fiddle with the budget. And that deadline is coming up very soon. Negotiations are starting, and I need to make sure that the district is included in this and it's part of it. I'm really glad that we're represented by Senator Nancy Skinner, who is a fierce warrior for public transit, and I know that she's going to work together with us.
Thank you, Ms. Fierce. Ms. Jones, same question. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, would you please?
Sure. Yeah. How do you propose to overcome the fiscal shortfall due to the drop in ridership and revenues in the short term and in the long term?
Well, I would like to review the last 2 years' budget, biannual budget. And I remember supporting Measure BB, and it passed in 2014. That was $80 billion. It doesn't sunset for quite some time. Maybe we could use some of that funding to help us get out of the hole. We can start there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Peoples, same question.
Yeah, the short term, the answer has to be the federal government. Federal government is the only arm of government that can run an unbalanced budget. The Federal Reserve is the only folks that can print money, but that's a whole different discussion. We did very well in the CARES Act. We are in better shape than many transit agencies because a larger portion of our budget comes from property taxes. As Victoria points out, that'll be affected by Prop 15, although not as much as the Prop 15 folks think. Our budget folks have said that'll bring in between $8 and $14 million. That's because a bunch of our property taxes are parcel taxes, which won't be affected by Prop 15. I would like to see, obviously, a rewrite of all of our tax laws, which are unfair and inequitable. But we've got fairly limited powers, and the power to tax ride shares is not one of the powers we have. So we have to work with the local communities to do that.
Thank you. Next question, and we're going to start with Ms. Jones. Do you agree with how changes in routes are being determined? And if not, what would you do differently?
Yes, I agree with the way some of the routes have been determined. Like that new BRT, that's a beautiful tempo project. Okay. It seems to have a little, I call them idiosyncrasies, like that left-hand turning lane, those people turning in front of the bus. I feel as though that is it's the most unsafe. I've never seen anything like it. As I travel up and down International Boulevard and 73rd, people are doing some very, very vicarious things. So for future planning, we need to really, really watch those types of situations so we won't wind up in the courts so much.
Thank you. Same question, Director Peoples.
Yes, I do. Our planning staff does an absolutely phenomenal job of public involvement. I sat down with them last week, reviewed the existing conditions report for the possible cutbacks we may have to make next fiscal year, unless some money comes in. And it's a 400-page document. They've got each line broken down into segments, et cetera. When they go out to the public, I remember when we did the cutbacks in 2010, which were all brought back after BB passed, they went out with maps that had all the streets on them, and they gave people tape that measured the amount of service we could provide and had people, put service on the streets. The problem is that many people don't choose to participate in such things. They go out to where the people are rather than just having their own meetings, but it's pretty geeky stuff and it's hard to get people to involve.
Thank you. And Ms. Fierce, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, please.
Sure. Do you agree with how changes in routes are being determined? And if not, what would you do differently?
Right. I don't necessarily agree with the changes themselves. However, I think that the way they're going about it could use some improvements. It's much better than other districts around the country who don't even have an elected representative at, guiding these changes. So I think that's a big plus in AC Transit already. But as far as, getting public engagement during COVID, that's a very difficult thing. And I think that the district planners are trying their hardest to make it happen. But that isn't to say that, we can't do better. We absolutely can do better. And I think to do that is we have to do better on communication. We have to change the way that we relate the district to riders. A lot of people don't necessarily know how this planning process works. And part of that is the district just doesn't tell people about it. Sure, we have some open workshops and whatnot, but I think it's kind of, shortchanging our riders to assume that it's too wonky, it's too technical when they ride it. They know how the system works. They know it better than anybody else.
Thank you. The next question is going to go first to Director Peoples. And the question is, what do you see as your role as an at-large director?
As the at-large director, I sort of keep an eye on what's going on all around the district. I back up district directors when they need help. For example, the district director down in South County, who's no longer there, had a lot of problems with illness. And so there were several times where for as much as a year, I was the full-time director down there. I was going to all the Chamber of Commerce lunches. I was going to the State of the City. I was, doing the lobbying of council members. We have a bunch of different roles. Part of our job is to be a local lobbyist, is to go and do the meetings with our community affairs and planning folks with local electeds. Part of the job is sort of keeping an eye on all the stuff that the district is doing. Part of the job is going to Sacramento and to Washington and speaking as an elected with other electeds.
Thank you. And Ms. Fierce.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Director Peoples just said, is that the role of an at-large director is you are kind of like the unifying force on the board, because you represent a lot of cities around the East Bay. And sure, Ward 1 is a part of it and Ward 2 is a part of it, but they represent very different cities which have their own very different political textures. And part of being at large is having a big regional idea and a big vision for the future where we're all knitted back together. And like I mentioned earlier, this is why I was appointed to the Regional Housing Planning Board of ABAG. And because I've got this regional eye, I am a unifier. I pull people together. I'm tearing down these walls, these artificial borders between these 101 cities in the Bay Area to make sure that we have one unified Bay Area. And, you know, a lot of the other lobbying work is also really important, as is, you know, providing bigger and more, I guess, top-down support for other directors in their wards. But at its core, you know, it's a unifier. It's being a unifier for the whole district.
Thank you. And Ms. Jones.
Yes. The at-large seat to me represents all of AC Transit, from El Sobrante to Fremont. That seat, however, is shared by two people. All of that pressure should not have to fall on Chris Peoples. There's another at-large director by the name of Joel Young. And with those two people, AC Transit should be a lot further along. And funding should definitely be found with two people, because we all know what? Two heads are better than one. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. The next question, it will go first to Ms. Fierce. And the question is, many riders are concerned about their personal and property safety. How can the AC Transit directors address the safety concerns of riders?
That's it's a very difficult question, because on one hand, I am certainly one of the people supporting the defund the police movement. And at the same time, we have to hold that intention with these people, with people's needs for safety and security of their personal body and their property. And that's really important. And one story that I hear over and over is about the drivers on the bus who are encountered with some kind of situation like that. And they don't really know what to do about it. And they just don't have the tools. They don't have the training to do it. That's why I want to change our education policies within the district, our training to include de-escalation, include some form of self-defense, so that the drivers, you know, they shouldn't have to hold this burden of being the security officer for a bus. But the reality is that sometimes they will have to be. And that's a big part of it. And yeah, it's a big problem, and we gotta change that.
Thank you. Same question. Ms. Jones.
Well, this is new news to my ears, because as a former bus driver at AC Transit hired the Alameda County Sheriff's Department to ride undercover with us. So I'm appalled to hear that this is going on. I really am. I really thought AC Transit, the board meeting I went to, they voted to renew that contract. And Chris Peoples, correct me if I'm wrong. If budget cuts have been that severe to where we no longer have an Alameda County Sheriff or Contra Costa County Sheriff, if we don't have the sheriff on the bus undercover anymore, that's a serious problem. If I had it as an employee, I want all of the rest of the employees to have it. So that would be another thing that I would add to the to-do list, is to bring that security contract back so we can have undercover Alameda County sheriffs on the bus.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Director Peoples.
Yeah, Dolene is correct. We have undercover sheriffs on the buses. They're still on the buses. That contract keeps getting renewed. I disagree with the premise of the question. AC Transit is a lot safer than many of the rail systems because everybody who gets on the bus has to walk by a driver, an operator. And the operators are pretty good at spotting problems and are pretty good at calling in. We don't have the problems that some other agencies have because all of our operators are trained in de-escalation techniques. There's sort of a three-step process. If there's a problem on the bus, the operator will try to do something about it. If the operator can't handle it, the operator calls a road supervisor. Road supervisors, most of whom are retired drivers or graduated drivers, are extensively trained in de-escalation techniques. And only if those two can't handle it do we call in a sheriff. As a result, we've never been sued and we've never had a complaint for any kind of police interaction with our public.
Thank you. Okay, next question. This question will go to Ms. Jones first. And the question is, what should AC Transit's policy be to ensure coordination with other transit agencies?
Well, that's a great question. And what first thing that comes to my mind, we'd have to review the policies that are currently in place. I would start there. And if there's nothing there, we'd have to create. So to sit down with the public transit agencies in all 9 counties, because I have a strong, due to the fact I'm a survivor of driving across that Bay Bridge during the Loma Prieta earthquake, I have a strong feeling that this next earthquake, it's going to take all 9 counties for us to get through that. So the plan needs to be that big and the policy needs to be just that big. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Peoples.
Yeah, there's a couple of aspects to it. One is the day-to-day, and Darlene must be forgetting there's about 50 pages in the driver's manual that talks about coordination with other agencies and what transfers we accept and what that we don't. We have to be very careful because our average ride is 3 miles. We operate a fairly extensive system. And let me give a quick example. The 51 bus runs on 11-minute headways off peak. BART runs at 15 minutes. Do we degrade the 51 so that it only runs at 15 minutes? And then once we've degraded it so it runs at 15 minutes, does it try to make a meet at Fruitvale, at 12th, at 19th, at Rockridge, or at Berkeley? We need to coordinate as well as we can. And I'm the one who originally set up the BART AC Transit Board Liaison Committee. I've sat on it for 15 years, on and off. We need to coordinate as much as possible, but we need to be aware that we need to take care of our people first.
Thank you. Ms. Fierce.
Yeah, regional coordination is a big deal. We've got the most fragmented transit network in the country. There's 27 different agencies. They all provide their own service, their own branding, their own paint service or livery, and little coordination, and there's not a whole lot of regional vision. I would love to see AC Transit support Seamless Bay Area, a regional initiative to unify this governance system. This fragmentation, it's how we've got this incoherent network that's just really inconvenient for a lot of people, especially newcomers to the area, or even people trying to go to somewhere they've never been before and they've lived here all their life. It's got short-sighted planning. Piecemeal transportation projects just kind of don't work together. And I think getting AC Transit behind seamless Bay Area to unify our fare schedules, unify our planning, unify all of our governance structures is really big. And that might mean that AC Transit and BART and VTA and all these agencies become amalgamated into a regional governance body. And I think that's only a good thing.
Thank you. Okay, here's our next question. It's another budget question. Director Peoples will be first. AC Transit currently is offering free bus rides to their passengers until October 18th, according to their website. As a result, I'm sure there is a budget problem currently. What are your priorities for reducing spending in order to ensure financial sustainability? Oh, you gotta unmute.
We don't really have a budget problem this fiscal year because of the CARES Act. The going back to collecting fares is partly a budget issue, but it's also mainly because we have now equipped all the buses with plexiglass shields that protect the operators from when the passengers come and put their money in the fare box, they're not breathing on the operators. Now we are providing free masks. We've put hand sanitizer things in the buses. So that's taking care of that problem. Unfortunately, we've clamped down pretty much as far as we can. About 75% of our budget is personnel. We're not hiring, but we're not laying anybody off. We are undertaking a planning process to look at 10, 20, or 30% service cuts if the budget requires that. We're working like hell to make sure the budget doesn't require that.
Thank you. Same question, Ms. Fierce. Do you want me to state the question?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Priorities for reducing spending. Yeah. Well, I think, Director Peoples is right, is that the truth of the matter is that there's not a whole lot that we can cut from this without getting into personnel. And, I've been supported by 2 unions in this campaign so far, and that's not something I can really stomach is letting people go. This is people's livelihoods. So it's really hard. It's a very difficult thing to try and find what little fat there is that we can cut from the budget. There's just really not. It's just very difficult to understate how severe and constrained we are. And I would love for us to be able to have, things that maybe we could take out of the budget, but we just don't. There's very little we can do. We could trim back on some administrative overhead involving, remote work and telecommuting and whatnot. But really, there's just some very difficult and unpleasant decisions are going to have to be made. And like I said, I'm fighting like heck to make sure that we get funding from the state, because I don't think the feds are going to help us out here.
Thank you. And Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Now, Chris Peoples said on the last question that I forgot some things, but this I did not forget. I remember when AC Transit cut the service, they closed a yard in Richmond to save the district, and they laid off people in the general offices. So if you look at that budget and today's time, which one is worse? That's my question. The crisis of today, or back then when a former AC Transit employee by the name of Kathleen Kelly pulled the button on the swamp? So we're starting from zero. Zero is a real number. And I would like to see this rabbit come out of this hat this time, because we're starting from zero. And I'm glad to be a part of the zero team to become one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. The next question, we'll start with Ms. Fierce. Tempo, the first bus rapid transit line in the East Bay, was inaugurated August 9th after many years of discussion and planning. What have been the results and how might they influence or contribute to future plans within AC Transit?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tempo is, I think, a really big deal out here in East Bay, and there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. I think that, you know, one of the lessons that I've learned from watching Tempo in the last decade it took to get around is that it takes a very long time to make these things happen, and it doesn't have to take forever for these things to happen. Other cities are able to implement BRT within, you know, a month or two. They simply go out and they paint it and they just do it. They've got it figured out. There's a lot to learn from other countries how we can do this. In addition, you know, some of the other lessons that we've learned from Tempo on this is how to better do community outreach and planning and what does and doesn't go wrong. A big part of it is coordinating all, you know, the 101 cities in the Bay Area. And that's the thing that I'm all about, is regional collaboration and coordination. The easiest thing for us to do is to give AC Transit the power to simply build bus lanes all over the East Bay, and not necessarily let cities that don't want transit because they bring unpleasant people like myself, renters, and allow that to just happen without objection. It's not a question of whether or not we want it, it's how do we want it.
Thank you. Ms. Jones.
Yes, could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Tempo, the first bus rapid transit line in the East Bay, was inaugurated August 9th after many years of discussion and planning. What have been the results and how might they influence or contribute to the future plans within AC Transit?
Okay, what has been the results? That from what I see and hear, people like it. And that's because it's new. Will that same concept work on San Pablo Avenue? That remains to be seen. That's a lot of cities going in a different direction, a different voting party, people, ideas. I just love the fact that it runs in my neighborhood and that it's new and we got to get used to it. And I pray to God nobody ever gets hit running to the middle of the street for the bus. That's just my worst fear. I'm gonna just put that out there. You know, we should really get a video to teach people how to catch that system because it's needed. I'm in all about safety for that. That's just my worst fear right there. But other than that, everyone likes it.
Thank you. And Director Peoples.
Yes, I have not yet gotten any good numbers on what's been going on with Tempo. Most of what I've gotten is anecdotal, just the way everybody else has. People seem to like it. Anecdotally, we're getting good ridership. The problem is those RTICs are limited to 18 passengers because of the social distancing. So it's really hard to tell. The first planning grant for that BRT was gotten in 1992. This is pretty terrifying for something that's supposed to go very quickly. I think what we've learned is AC Transit is not going to build another one of those. There is a proposal on San Pablo and several others that will be built by ACTC on the Alameda County Transportation Commission. That's probably a good idea because they bring money to the table. They control the Measure BB money. And all of the cities that we're working with depend on them for other types of BB money. So they've got clout over the cities. I think it's a good idea where it can be done. but it needs to be done by somebody whose specialty is construction rather than operations.
Thank you. So the next question is going to be our last one. And this is a little different. This is going to require a one-word answer. And the questions are different. There's one question for our incumbent and then one for the challengers. So I'll start with Director Peoples. One-word answer. How many board meetings have you missed in the last year? Can't hear you.
0.
Thank you. And the challenger question will be, how many board meetings have you attended in their entirety in the last year? And we'll start with Ms. Fierce.
Well, 6. I do a lot more than AC Transit. That's 6 AC Transit meetings.
Okay. And Ms. Jones?
I wanted to make sure I was unmuted. Yes. Are we calculating the virtual as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So let's say that I would say 7.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now, before the candidates give their closing statements, I have a few remarks on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville. Thank you to the candidates for running for office and for your participation this evening. I also want to thank the audience for engaging in our democracy. For further information about upcoming forums, the candidates, pros and cons, and positions on ballot measures, please visit the League's website, lwvbae.org or votersedge.org/ca. We're now ready to do the closing. Oh, we invite you to join the League to help us engage voters and defend democracy. We do so much more than voter registration and education. Visit our website and social media accounts at LWVBAE. The deadline to register to vote is October 19th this year, and you can register to vote online at the Secretary of State's website, sos.ca.gov. And remember to vote by mail or at the polls by Tuesday, November 3rd. This year, we are encouraging voters to vote as early as possible. Please see our website for more information about voting in this election. And now, the candidates will make their closing statements, and we will reverse the order that we began with, which means, who remembers? It means that Director Peoples goes first, then Ms. Fierce, and then Ms. Jones. Director Peoples.
Thank you. And thank you once again to the League of Women Voters. These are always very valuable meetings, both for us candidates and also for the voters out there. I think we've had a good discussion of the issues this evening. I would like to encourage you to join with the Sierra Club, the League of Conservation Voters, the Democratic Party, the Green Party, the Central Labor Councils of both Alameda and Contra Costa counties in supporting my reelection to the at-large director position at AC Transit. Yes, I've been doing this a long time, and yes, I'm old and bald, but I'm still quite active in all of this stuff. And all of these folks think that I've been doing a pretty good job and should continue to do it. So thank you, and take a look at Voters Edge if you want to read some more about me and my positions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fierce.
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to make my case. I think it's abundantly clear it's time for new leadership in AC Transit, and I'm bringing that leadership. I have the competency, I have the skills, and I have the support of the East Bay. Before the start of this race, I asked several incumbents on their thoughts on regional collaboration, and I was told that it was impossible, that BRT taught the district it can't work together, that it can't build a better transit. And respectfully, I dissent. We can and we must work together. Our lives literally depend on it to save the world. I bring people together. I make collaboration work. I'm not content to just tinker around the edges of our problems, and I intend to solve them. And even if Biden wins this fall, unless we start doing the hard work of rebuilding trust in institutions and trust in each other, things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. I want to work on strengthening collaboration with the East Bay cities. As I said earlier, it's the only way we'll get bus lanes, which is why I'm supported by planners from cities all over the district. Regional collaboration is why I'm on the ABAG-RENA committee, helping the region plan for housing and transit. And I'm running for the district so we can maximize the power of our transit-oriented development laws our Democratic legislators fought so hard for. And I thank you for your support and the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Jones.
Yes, I would like to thank all of my endorsees, the Honorable Gabriel Quintino off of the City Council. He's a city councilman on the city of El Cerrito. I'm also endorsed by the Black Women of Political Action, Organized for Political Action, and the Lambda Democratic Club. And let's see, I like that nice article that the UC Berkeley Daily Californians wrote. That's also a plus, I feel. Everyone go read that. But for my last minute, half a minute here, I love running this race. Change is going to come. It's inevitable. And the money should come with it. That's just what I have to say at the end of this night. That we should definitely sustain AC Transit. Thank you, and everyone have a great night.
Thank you all. And for everyone in attendance, please join me in a round of applause for our candidates, which I guess we go like this, right? On Zoom. And thank everybody. That's it. Thanks to everybody for attending, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.